Welcome along to the Matchbook Cheltenham Trail. It's episode 11, so delighted to welcome, as usual, our regular duo of Matt Toombs and Donn McClean, but also happy to introduce another guest on the podcast. This is Matchbook's horse racing regular weekly podcast host, not Nick Luck, Tom Stanley. Tom, welcome.
Thanks. I feel honoured. It's nice to have graduated to the real show from obviously just the sort of weekly filler. This is where the real experts sit. So it's good to be here. And to be honest, I'm quite pleased I'm here with good proximity to the festival because, I think I'd have been struggling a long way out, but now we have a bit more meat on the bones and we know where most of the horses are running, except for Willie Mullins' horses.
Yes, the Willie Mullins horses. It's always the question, Don, I guess, on everyone's lips. It's great to have someone on track though yesterday with all the answers. So tell us where all these horses are going.
Yeah, I'm none the wiser, Dan. I'm probably more confused now than I was yesterday morning before we got there. But look, it was brilliant to go to Willie's and to see all those horses. We know that the depth that he has in terms of talent that he's assembled there, and it's a perennial thing, as we know. But now it was just a bit of a privilege really to get there and spend some time with Willie and see all these horses. But yeah, Willie, in terms of targets, he's still the ones that we didn't know about before yesterday morning. We don't really still know about exactly where they're going to go. Maybe slightly bit of an inclination one way or the other, but nothing definitive.
Yeah, Matt, I guess it's the question on everyone is when I saw the Willie Mullins yard, it's the first year I felt, I know we're going to get a lot of clues here, but not frustration with it all, but it just seems very repetitive every year. We're going to Willie Mullins trying to get a few quotes, but I guess for you, you're always going to be excited trying to play the Willie Mullins bingo.
Absolutely, yeah. Love a game of Mullins bingo. We'll come on to a bit of that later on, but listening to him, a lot of people just say, oh, it's a stream of consciousness, you learn nothing. But actually, I do think you can learn a few things from listening to him. We'll probably touch on that a little bit when we get to the Supreme later on.
Absolutely. Well, let's just, and Matt sort of alluded to it there, we're going to cover two Cheltenham races. It's the Supreme and the Arkle up this week. We're going to look at Eyecatchers here, and then we're also looking at weekend review, including trends, and that's where we're going to start with the weekend review. But some of those will sort of feed into the Eyecatchers. They'll make sense as we go. If you are watching on YouTube, hit that like button, subscribe completely for free. As Tom touched on, you can get the weekly horse racing podcast, but we do also have a lot of Cheltenham content coming your way over the next 4 weeks. We will start with our weekend review. And Matt, bring us your trend on the Denman Chase first of all.
The trend is that winners are 4 from 13 in the Gold Cup this century, 7.50% profit, flat track, often decent ground, and a trip of just under 3 miles, rather than the near 3 1/4 of the Cotswold Chase, which is often on testing ground, and it's been a much better prep for a Gold Cup.
Okay, yeah, Tom, you're a fan of you're the Shishkin bandwagon fan. You're the Shishkin man. So I think there's going to be a bit of debate here between you and Matt. So let's do this back and forth.
Well, look, the thing with Shishkin is if you believe he would have won the King George, and I just sit on the side of would have done if he hadn't have suffered that unfortunate stumble over his own leg, which is effectively what it was. It was a freak incident. If you believe he would have won the King George, well, he's subsequently then had the perfect prep race for a Gold Cup in going and winning a Denman Chase. He seems to have ironed out all of his issues at the start. And this is all the positives. Just to bring you some race IQ data as well, which is something that they run in partnership with Racing TV, which is where I'm currently. His jumping was faultless. He gained 9 lengths jumping over the field, and his closing sectionals were excellent, indicating that we know he stays the trip. He's probably still got to go some way to match his 2 mile form over 3 miles, but he is still an unexposed stayer. And he clearly relishes this trip. So those are all the positives. You've just got to weigh that up with the potential negative of the Cheltenham Cauldron, which will be a different beast. And everything that comes with that, not just the crowd and obviously the walk under the walkway out to the track, but also what the other riders may or may not do in the race just to try to get at Shishkin. It's everyone's mecca, isn't it? So it's no holds barred down at the start. Is there a way that they can gain a yard here or there by trying to get in Shishkin's head? Those are all possibilities. But I look at his price at double figures and I'm not taking it. but I feel like I couldn't put anyone off after what was a fairly faultless display. I've been hugely impressed with him, and I know Matt's going to. There's a trend that Matt has second season chasers, which is going to go into his Insights article for the Gold Cup. But I want to link into that with the fact that Shishkin is by no means a second season chaser, but he's a second season stayer, if you like, or a first season stayer, having tried it for the first time at the back end of last year. So he's very unexposed at the trip. If I was going to back one horse now for a Gold Cup, it would be him, but I still can't quite press the button.
Okay, Matt, put people off the double figure price on Shishkin for the Gold Cup.
Well, the jockeys were all very polite at the start again, weren't they? They kept moving forward so Shishkin didn't have to stop. Will it really be as nice as that in the Gold Cup? Shishkin showed much more enthusiasm here. I thought that was a real improvement from Kempton, where he had to be rousted along to get going. Here, once he did jump off, he looked much more enthusiastic. Ran his snatches a bit, backed off a couple, but if it wasn't a horse that you were looking at as quirky, you probably wouldn't have placed too much emphasis on that. Protectorat and Hitman are good horses, but even assuming they run to form, beating them less than 5 lengths means he'll need to improve a fair bit from there to win a Gold Cup, and a huge amount if Galopin de Champ turns up in top form, though you can say that about any of the other contenders. So veterans, 0 from 77 in the Gold Cup this century. I just think that when the white hot heat of the Gold Cup comes on, even if he does jump off, he won't fancy it. So the way I'll probably play him is to look to lay him for a place on the day, rather than in the win market now. And I imagine he could well shorten a bit. If you do fancy Shishkin, and this isn't me trying to goad Tom into backing him, I'd be tempted to back him now, because I think there'll be plenty of people who will look at that King George and look at the Denman and say, actually, he should probably be second favourite.
Okay, yeah, Don, sort of be the side and vote here. I'm with Matt for what it's worth on. I think he will shorten. I think people will latch on to Shishkin once they think he was the potential King George winner, wins the Denman pretty comfortably. It all sort of stacks up for a gamble on the Gold Cup heading into the Friday of the Cheltenham Festival.
Yeah, fully agree with that. I think he's going to be a popular horse. He is a popular horse in general, and unlucky losers, we know that, or unlucky looking losers, we know that they're generally overbet next time. And like, they look back even on his back form and his ability and his talent as a hurdler, and he's just a high profile popular horse. But he's 10 years old, as Matt said. Like, Cool Dawn is the last 10-year-old to win a Gold Cup. It's very, very difficult to get to this stage. And I take Tom's point that he's relatively unexposed as a stayer, but he's still a 10-year-old. It's very hard for older horses to win a Gold Cup for all the reasons. And in the Denman Chase, I thought he was good in the end. Like, he stayed on well, and when he came under a ride, Hitman looked to be traveling better than him, but you kind of always knew that Hitman's stamina was suspect, and he didn't probably see it out fully. Whereas Shishkin, he just, that kind of time when he's ridden along, call it a flat spot or whatever you want to call it, he does fine for that, and he stayed on well. But I can see him hitting that flat spot in the Gold Cup, and against Faster Slow and Galopin de Champ, just not being able to recover that ground. I can see Faster Slow being probably weak in the market. As we get closer to the time, I can see him drifting, and Shishkin taking his place as second favourite behind Galopin de Champ. But no, look, admirable horse though Shishkin is, and obviously he's got all that back ability and back achievement. No, I won't be with him in the Gold Cup.
Okay, yeah, Tom, any enlightened after this? I presume you're sticking to your guns no matter what here.
No, I can't. Like I said, I because it's a Gold Cup, I can't. And both Matt and I have alluded to this fact. Because it's the heat of Cheltenham and everything that comes with that, the atmosphere, the crowd, the other riders in the race, where they won't be giving an inch. I can't do it. But I just, at the bare prices, if you look at his last 2 runs, I could see why some might be very positive about him. It's less the age thing that worries me. It's just more because he's only trying this trip this season for the first time. It's just more the Gold Cup day and everything that comes with that. I don't think we can say Shishkin is cured. He's been allowed to show his best, but I would be surprised if he went through a Gold Cup as well as he did the Denman Chase, where I thought he was hugely impressive, albeit against Hitman, who's got a hole in him, and Protectorat, who frankly, whatever trip you're running him over, he doesn't jump well enough.
Yeah, you got a bit of stick from Charlie Post on the podcast Protector app, but you were correct, I guess, Tom. Maybe he isn't a good horse, who knows? But I saw a funny tweet. It's like all layers of Shishkin knew they were in trouble when the only danger looming on the outside was Hitman. So I thought that was quite funny. But Matt, final word to you on Shishkin. I guess you'll be placing him in the Gold Cup, but racing overalls picture, which is what we're all here for in the end of the day, it would be some story, Matt. So you'd be happy to lose your money, I take it, if he bolted up and beat Galopin Des Champs in the Gold Cup.
Not remotely happy, no. More seriously, I agree. It would be a great story. I think a 10-year-old who was a very good 2-miler, winning the Arkle, winning a Clarence House, and then coming through to win a Gold Cup. It would be great. I think the sport is better when horses run at different distances, the top horses in particular. And that used to be very much the norm, Corto Star and Desert Orchid and horses like that. And the more that horses can successfully do that sort of thing, the richer the sport becomes. So, yeah, part of me would be very pleased if he does win. Yeah,
no, I think there's a lot of subplots to this Gold Cup outside of Galopin Des Champs, so hopefully we'll see a lot of that come on the Friday of the Cheltenham Festival. The Game Spirit Chase, Matt, can you give us a trend? I'll let Don come in first on this race.
The trend is that 15 winners have run in the Champion Chase this century. 3 won, 4 of the others were placed. Now, before the Clarence House was converted from a limited handicap to a Grade 1, this was a natural final prep for the British Champion Chase contenders, in an era when running a month before the festival wasn't seen as an issue. Altior was the only champion chaser to come out of the Game Spirit since 2008, so it's not the trial it was.
Yeah, Don, this was a change of tactics for Edwardstone, and while the opposition ultimately disappointed, he seemed to enjoy himself a lot more out there.
Yeah, I thought he was very good, Dan. It was good to see him ridden aggressively. Tom Cannon got him going forward, got him jumping, and I know Boothill came down and Amarillo Sky just didn't finish off his race, but Boothill was beaten when he fell. He beat Fulhambulis Savola by 40 lengths. And to me, this was Edwardstone back to form. Like you could see the experiment of stepping up to 2.5 miles. You can see why they took it on, but it just didn't work in the Sylvania County Chase last time. He was held up. He was too keen. He was too free. He was well beaten in the end. Just put a line through that run and ridden aggressively and gone forward like this. I thought we saw a different side to Edwardstone here, and you'd be surprised if they did anything other than run him in the Champion Chase, A, and B, ride him like this in the Champion Chase. And I think it's a new dimension to a Champion Chase now. If they do that and allow him go forward, we know he's got Cheltenham Festival winning form. He's a classy horse. He's 10 years old now, but the Champion Chase is not like the Gold Cup. Older horses can win the Champion Chase. And yeah, like even 8-1 about him in a Champion Chase market or thereabouts 9.0. I can see that being attractive for many in the win and place part of as a win and place bet.
Yeah, Matt, I know you were the first one to sort of mention, or at least I heard a change of tactics perhaps a couple of starts ago when we potentially looking at a view to running him in the Ryanair. So can you see this front running tactics in a Champion Chase causing El Fabiolo any issues?
Potentially. I mean, he might not get his own way out there. Something like Gentleman to Me wants to lead, but I thought Edwardstone was just happy at going his own gallop. I'm not necessarily sure he'd want to lead. He would just go at his own pace. And he's been held up all his life, really. So he looked to really enjoy it, as Don said. And I think he's got a decent chance of certainly reaching the front based on that sort of run. Whether he's good enough to make El Fabiolo out of his ground, I don't think he is, because El Fabiolo is such a strong traveller and he's so powerful at the end of the race. Perhaps if he makes mistakes, then he'd get out of his ground, get into trouble. But I just think he's a cut above these. The other one I wanted to mention was the other finisher, Funambule Civilar, who won the previous 2 renewals on much faster ground. From when he was in shot, he looked to be tenderly handled. When Boothill and Amarillo Sky were asked for their efforts early in the straight, he wasn't in shot for much of the business end. And he's shown very little since his fall in last season's Champion Chase. Finished a respectful second in the Champion Chase 2 years ago, rated 163 in consequence. Been dropped another pound today to 144, 12 pounds lower than when he started the season. So if he were to show up in the Grand Annual, he's the classic conundrum. Has he gone? Or is he one of those who've been plotted up using the BHA handicapper's willingness to drop horses quicker now? Global Citizen have been dropped from a peak of 156 to 136, won the Grand Annual 2 years ago at 29.0. Hiding in plain sight in these open graded conditions races can be a good tactic to get a winnable handicap mark. A few years ago, Dnaiel was 4th in the Slough, 8th in the Tingle Creek, 3rd in this, and he won the Grand Dnaiel off 145 at 41.0. Now, you wouldn't describe Venetia Williams as a trainer who gives loads away talking to the media, but it'll still be interesting to see what the vibes are like if he does go for the Grand Dnaiel.
Okay, and maybe one to keep on side there. Tom, what did you make of Ederson's change of tactics? And I guess the question I should have asked Matt really is maybe perhaps to beat a John Bon in a champion chase rather than an El Fabiola.
I still wouldn't have him down to beat a John Bon. I think John Bon is a cut above as well. I think I don't really have a huge amount to add to what the guys have said. To be honest, the change of tactics is interesting. Surely they will go about it. I know Matt said go at his own pace, but he did just he wasn't fighting his rider, which he has been obviously over further last time. There was a sign I thought at Sandown that he travelled better. But there's still a bit of an early fight, or there was with him, which there wasn't. He settled into a beautiful rhythm. I mean, his jumping was exemplary. He gained 15 lengths on the field. So I'm sure they will look to go about it a similar way. And that makes the champion chase that little bit more interesting. You know, obviously going about it the Undersow way as opposed to try and hold him up. You know, if you're looking to play in the run, if he's going off about 9.0 on the day, I'm not sure he will, but if he was, you know, he may well trade shorter in the run. That could be an angle. But I think there are two horses in the betting ahead of him who are superior to him, and I, you know, ultimately I can't really have Edward Stone in mind as a champion chase winner. Although I think I napped him on the Tuesday last year, so there you go.
So the year is a long time in horse racing.
Very long time.
Some of the horses we backed at last year's Cheltenham Festival, you won't want to back them in any race going forward. We'll move on to the Betfair Hurdle here, which was a really good finish here. Matt, hit us with your trend and your thoughts on the race here. Pirgo Lord seemed a pretty impressive winner.
Yeah, it was. The trend is that runners are 2 from 82 in the last 16 county hurdles. Those two winners went off 34.0 and 26.0, so the P&L isn't as bad as the bare stat. But both races have become dominated by novices who win one but not both. The actual handicappers that make up the bulk of the field don't get that great a chance when there are all these unexposed novices in the field. Novices have won 9 of the last 15 Betfairs, 6 of the last 12 counties. Perhaps the need for novices to have had 4 runs, not 3, will change that. It's early days. But at the moment, I'm sticking with the premise that this won't be a source of a lot of county hurdle winners. It's interesting about Iberico Lord. Interpreting the vibes a dangerous pastime, but important. One of my rules is paying attention when a trainer does something that's out of character. Most of the top trainers have been doing it a long time. It's natural. To some extent, they become creatures of habit. And as well as being a brilliant trainer, Nicky Henderson's an emotional man, and there can sometimes be clues from that. I remember how upset he was with the mark Dame de Compagnie got given in the Coral Cup 4 years ago. They appealed it, got it reduced. She was a heavily back winning favourite. And Nicky had a real rant about the Castle de Mott's handicap mark, saying in his blog, "It's an absolute joke, although not one I'm laughing at. This seems very strange and needs looking into." And I'd had no intention of backing Iberico Lord until I heard that. But it absolutely shouted out that Nicky thought one of his was lobbed in, and he was irritated that there might be something that was even more thrown in that could beat him. I thought it was another good ride from Nico de Boinville, who, despite a huge number of wins in top races, isn't a jockey who seems to be rated. Perhaps there's a bit of inverse snobbery against the well-heeled de Boinville-Henderson axis. I think he's a good judge of pace, which is one of the main things I look for in a jockey. Iberico Lord's up £9 to 143. The one horse to do the Betfair Hurdle County Double, this Century Spirit Leader, did so off exactly a £9 higher mark, but that'll be a tough ask, I think. One wider point I wanted to ask the lads about, and this isn't something I've got a strong view on, I just started thinking about. The favourite had to be reshod here. And we had to wait nearly 8 minutes. Harry Cobden said to Luke Harvey while they were waiting, his horse was running his race in the preliminaries due to the delay and he was duly pulled up. You only need to look at the in-running comments on the Racing Post website every day to see how common it is for horses to end the race with at least one shoe missing. They're there for a purpose. It's clearly a negative, but for most horses, a relatively minor one, certainly not a welfare issue. Is it fair that we delay a race like this for 8 minutes and really inconvenience some of the other runners, or should they just have to make a decision whether they run or not?
Yeah, Tom, over to you for that, and then your thoughts.
I it's probably not fair, but I don't see it changing in any way. I mean, it's an issue they have to deal with on the flat, regularly when you struggle to load a horse into the stalls, and you have some horses, particularly in a big field, who may have been in there for some time. Some horses will have been in there for, upwards of 3 or 4 minutes at times, which is unfair on them. But again, I don't see a way around it. I never know how much losing a shoe makes a difference. I was looking at comments on Will Mount, who incidentally, as our producer is confirming, has been taken out the Supreme Novices Hurdle, but he lost a shoe in the Challow. But I mean, that's the only possible thing that could have inconvenienced him. I never know. It can't really excuse an absolutely terrible run. But I think it would be considered more unfair to not permit a horse to run in 4 shoes. And don't they have to wear hind shoes anyway in the UK? Is that not the rule, that they have to wear hind shoes when jumping anyway? Than it would be to, unfair on the horses that have to wait while a horse is reshod. I cannot see, particularly in the UK with the BHA being so safety concerned, that there would ever be a scenario where a horse was not allowed to be reshod because it was affecting other horses who were waiting down at the start.
Yeah, your thoughts, Don?
Yeah, it was an inordinately long time, wasn't it? Because Castle he just wasn't playing ball, and it just seemed like I was watching from Naas, which ruined Naas, by the way. The race ran into the preview of the next race at Naas. I didn't get to see the Betfair Hurdle. But I agree with Tom. I can't see it changing anytime soon. And it's a what's the cutoff point? You say 3 minutes, 4 minutes, 5 minutes. Where is the cutoff point? And National Hunt racing, it's a little bit better. Obviously, they're not standing in stalls. Most of them should be okay. Just waiting for the start to happen. Albeit that's not obviously the case across the board. It kind of a different impact on different horses, given horses with different temperaments. But in the end, on the race itself, I agree with Matt on the ride that Nico de Bonville gave Iberico Lord. He was so patient on him. Even jumping the last, he was about 3 lengths down. Lotus would have gone for home, and he didn't really go for Iberico Lord until they got over the last, and then he picked up well, and the two of them pulled well clear. Another interesting point in Newbury at the weekend, it was officially heavy ground. The times say it was a lot quicker than that. So you're looking for soft ground horses. Soft ground horses who ran in the Betfair Hurdle are disappointed. You might give them another chance. I thought Knickerbocker Glory ran a big race as well from the front in a race that was well run, and he was right there until just on the run to the second last flight, and then he kept on. So I think he might be a better horse back on softer ground. But no, the winner won well, and I thought a £9 hike was, you couldn't have hoped for any less than that. I thought he deserved all of that, and he's a horse who I think could go up in grade given how well he won and how far the front two pulled clear.
Yeah, Tom, final word to you on this race, I guess. Matt tweeted about the Nicky Henderson vibes, I think Thursday or Friday before the Betfair. So I think it's listen to 100% and only maybe pick up on that 1% of time. But sometimes it is worthwhile reading these blogs, and sometimes it is worthwhile picking up on vibes from some of these trainers like Nicky Henderson.
Yeah, and also, Nicky's got such a good record in this race. Willie Mullins not so, and I got suckered into a Castle Day Martin, the fact that he was £6 well in on his Irish mark, which was a bit of that he wasn't even meant to have an Irish mark, if you like, and that wasn't part of the plan. But it was Willie really not believing Anthony Bromley, so he entered him at Leopardstown anyway, just to confirm that the horse was going to be well in. So I was guilty of getting sucked into that. Ultimately on Nicky Henderson's record and form, I guess this horse was the winner was off the back of a disappointing run last time, I know, but potentially fairly treated. Didn't work out at all last time, but I thought he got a good ride. The horse's finishing speed was 103%, so it's above par. He finished well from off the pace. You quite often get a high finishing speed if a horse is ridden on the pace and they've gone slow. They didn't go hell for leather early, but they went quick enough for this race when it can often pay to be on speed. All in all, he was hugely impressive, and I'm not sure what his rise is, but he's a horse dramatically on the up. Can I mention Eyecatchers wise? Do you want me to go now on the horse that I put out this race? So
give us your three and start with the one in this race.
Okay, perfect. So I thought, first of all, Doddy the Great is well worth following up in distance. So as far as jumping went, the winner and Loda Sud were the best. Favour was pretty good as well. And then Doddy the Great. He jumped well. He obviously made that bad error 2 out, although it was more the fact that he got short of room. But as far as the sectionals go, that tells us a little bit more about Doddy the Great's run, who was, when he started to make his challenge over the last half a mile, he came from further back than anything and still finished with a finishing speed percentage of over 100%. He finished quicker than Go Dante and Loda Sud, and indeed all of those behind him. His finishing last half mile was only second to Iberico Lord. He just, these figures are all backing up the view that he is going to want further, and looks like he wants further. But it wasn't just a case of him being patiently ridden where they went very hard. It wasn't like it was perfectly run to suit him. There's an element of it was run to suit, but I think the visuals overdo that. I think he still did very well to be quickening late on, but he's a horse that I think wants 2.5. I'll be interested where he gets entered up. And I know the stable won it, but I am almost more interested going forward in Doddy the Great when he goes to 2.5.
Okay, and then you've got 2 other Eyecatchers for us from the weekend.
Yes, I do. So one of them ran in the 10 up. I need to get the figures up here, but it's Nick Rocket. Again, it's a pretty obvious case in that he looks as though off the back of his run at Naas, he wants a little bit further, and that is at Navan, and that is backed up by the figures. The winner jumped much better than him, and Nick Rocket, that was a disappointment the way he jumped. He jumped poorly, so that if we're going to look at him for a not quite 4 miler, then that's a slight concern, his jumping. But he finished off incredibly well. Again, the only horse in the race to go over 100% with that finishing speed percentage. He was quickening all the while late on. He ran a quicker last furlong than the winner, who was all in all more polished, but the figures definitely back up the view that Nick Rocket is a horse who was obviously patiently ridden on the day, who is going to want a little bit further. So if he brushes up his jumping, I think we can be pretty positive about him going forward. And the other one ran earlier on in the day, Da Capo Glory, who probably wants slightly better ground. This was in the Boyne. I thought he was just outstayed by a really exciting horse in Hidden Valley Lake. I'm not sure what they're going to do with him, but Da Capo Glory are back on better ground and over 2.5. I know he's won on testing ground, but it was particularly testing at the weekend. I'm not sure that suited. He jumped better than anything in the race, gave him 5 lengths on the field. And again, he was going very well until that last furlong. He was pretty slow, markedly slower than the last couple. Than the 2 that finished ahead of him. I think he just got tired. They hadn't gone that quick early on, and thus the finishing speed percentages were very high in the race as a whole. But Da Capo Glory, I think, in the ground got tired, but that was a bit of a step up for him. Hopefully he's left alone mark-wise. He'd obviously won a handicap hurdle prior to that, and I think going back into 2.5 miles on slightly better ground, he's one I'll keep an eye on anyway, Da Capo Glory.
Okay, Doddy the Great, Da Capo Glory, and Nick Rocket. Tom's 3 Eyecatchers. Matt, over to you for your 3.
First is Rock My Way, who was well back for the Novices Limited handicap chase over nearly 3 miles at Newbury. He looked as if he was becoming reluctant in recent starts, but looked potentially well handicapped off 131 if putting it all together. That was on the basis he won the Grade 2 Classic Novice Hurdle last season, beating Pembroke, who was 135 over hurdles, now 143 over fences. Mufasa, 132 over hurdles, now 134 over fences. And he looked the winner here, traded about 1.23 in running. Didn't look like he was putting it all in at the business end, got run out of it by making your mind up, the pair a long way clear. He's up £1 to 132 now, looks to be crying out for some headgear. Probably sneak into the ultimate. Sid Hussey looks a pretty positive sort of trainer, so it wouldn't surprise me if he turned up in that. Whether he's quite ready for that, I don't know, but I'll definitely consider backing him for a staying handicap chase if I see the head going on, hopefully at a slightly lower level. Second one is Ramillies in the 3 mile 1 Hunter at Naas. I put him up as my dark horse when we did Jumpers to Follow at the start of last season. He cruised into the Albert Bartlett, not got the trip. And I put him up on the basis he proved best at intermediate trips on a sound surface. But Willie ran him at 3 mile plus all season as a novice chaser. Joined David Christie, won 4 points, but in better company in a truly run race like this. He again proved an on-stayer, traded at 1.31 in running, walked over the line. So obviously plenty of people who didn't share my stamina concerns. And the race that looks ideal for Ramillies is the Aintree Fox Hunter over 2.5. Given that he's run over 3 mile plus for his last 15 starts, I doubt many punters will see dropping back as an advantage in trip. He's been exposed as not one of the best hunters at 3 miles plus. David Christie's got a lot of good hunters, so I've no idea if that is the plan, but I could see myself backing him at likely long odds if it is. And the final one is Gosh How Posh. Eye-catching runs come in all sorts of ways, and what was eye-catching about the 2.5 favourite in the Pretemps qualifier at Exeter, he never went a yard at the heavy ground, didn't like it, pulled up. His improvement this season's come on a sound surface. I'll give him a pass for this. Having already qualified for the Pretemps final, I'm not quite sure why he's running here. Perhaps Connections wanted to get him up in the handicap from 127, given that historically you needed a mark in the mid-130s to get a run in the final. Ignoring the COVID year, the other 6 renewals when we had the finish in the first 6 to qualify, the cut was between 131 and 137, normally nearer the latter. Last year, the first year of the finish in the first 4 to qualify, only 24 were declared for 24 spots. The last in was dead off 10 stone 2 off a mark of 121. Now, it's a dangerous game predicting cut marks for the festival handicaps as you get renewals that are outliers. But looking at the qualifiers so far, my hunch is it'll be a similar story to last year. If you're qualified and you want to run, you're probably going to be able to get it. Back on a sound surface, I'd expect Gosh How Posh to be a totally different proposition, whether in the final or another good 3 mile handicap in the spring. He's about 34.0 for the final.
Okay, that's Gosh How Posh, all one word, Ramillies and Rock My Way from Matt. Donn, Mascada, it seems every week we talk get Mascada, so I'm not complaining.
Yeah, I thought she'd run better on Sunday or on Saturday than she did. They rode her forward. She's had a good fast pace. Allegory Devassi was very good in the end, but through the early part of the race, Allegory Devassi was jumping to her right. She wasn't doing anything correctly. And then I thought Paul Denner was super, and Allegory Devassi just smuggled her into the race. And then she and Riviere de Tel went down. I thought the two at the top of the market were vulnerable, and they finished first and second. Mascada, I thought she ran well to a point, but I just think she's better in behind the pace, off a fast pace, instead of having to make a run running. That's what she did when she won the Grand Annual last season. She's £7 higher, I think, now than she was then. And the Grand Annual could be the plan for again this year. The Mare's Chase also could be a plan. She did win a Tim Duggan Chase over 2.5 miles on soft ground. I know it's at a lower level, but I think maybe stepping up and trip to 2.5 miles and ridden just behind the pace, because we know that she's got, Cheltenham Festival winning form, which to me is always key. So just keep an eye on her wherever she goes next. She might be a wee bit underrated after a sensibly disappointing run on Saturday. Second one is American Mike, who won the race in which Tom's Nick Rocket was in. I thought he look, American Mike, we know he's got bundles of talent. He's a little bit hit and miss, and he was missed the last time he ran. That was at Limerick in the race that Gaelic Warrior won. But Limerick at Christmas time on really soft ground, I'm always inclined to forgive a horse a poor run in those conditions. And when American Mike went back over fences, started over fences at Navan in the early part of the year, he beat Factifile, and he beat him on merit. Now, I know Factifile is a different horse now compared to the horse he was then. He's obviously improved from then, but it was a good performance by American Mike, and it was a good performance again by him on Saturday. It was his first time over 3 miles, and he saw it out well. He was actually between the second last, or on the run to the second last, it looked like he had the race in the bag. Then he seemed to idle between the second last and last, but when Nick Rocket came to him, he picked up again and up the hill at Naas. It's a stiff climb on soft ground up the hill, so there was a lot to like about the attitude that he showed in picking up again to repel the challenge of Nick Rocket. And the time that they clocked was nearly 20 seconds faster at the time that the handicap chase was running later in the day. And I know I think the top weight in the handicap chase was in 120, so it's at a different level, but 20 seconds is a lot of seconds. So to me, American Mike, he was in the Arkle. I think he's been taken out of the Arkle. Ryan just posted there. He's in the Turners as well. Obviously, the Brown Advisory would be the race for him at Cheltenham. I don't think he's in it. And Gordon Elliott was talking maybe about the Irish National afterwards. So to me, the 3 miles brought about another dimension to him. So I think, like he has been hit and miss, and he's been a bit disappointing on occasion in the past. But I think fences and this type of trip, they could be key to him. And the third then is Whiskey Wealth, who won the Adair Manor Opportunity Handicap Hurdle at Naas. And look, he was competing off a hurdles mark of 113. And we didn't know that it was 12 pounds lower than his chase mark. We didn't know that he could replicate it, but the only time that he finished over hurdles for Terence O'Brien since he joined him was on a second run for him when he was beaten. But he's improved over fences since then. His hurdles mark is now back up to 121, which is still 4 pounds lower than his chase mark. But he won so easily. I think there could be more to come from him. It was a good day for Terence O'Brien. Actually, Answer to Cave won the earlier race, the rated novices hurdle, or the Irish auction, the Red Mills auction hurdle. But Whiskey Wealth, he was unlucky the last day as well when he fell the last time he ran over hurdles, when he possibly would have won at Thurles, but he put it all together. He won with lots in hand. And yeah, I think he's a horse who still could be well handicapped over hurdles in a mark of 121.
Okay, Whiskey Wealth, American Mike, same race as Nick Rocket and Moscada, maybe with a view to the festival, either the Mayor's Chase or perhaps a Grand Annual. And we'll go to our first of 2 Cheltenham Festival races. We'll be covering the Arkle. And we have some scratchings there that have just come through to us there, so bear with us. We've got American Mike, Captain Combi, Dr. Bravo, Iroko, Safior, and Uncle Phil all scratched from the Arkle. I thought Iroko would have been an interesting runner there. Marine Nationale is the current 3.75 favourite, found at 56.0, same price as Ilete Tom. Gaelic Warrior 9.0, Facile Vega 10.0, same price as Hunter's Yarn. Calixios 11.0, JPR 1 13.0, 21.0, and bigger the rest. Matt Toombs, take it away with the trends for this race that you work towards, and then your overall thoughts on how the race is looking. We're currently exactly a month from this race.
Yeah, the trend is that 16 winners this century were either unbeaten over fences, 13, or would have been but for tipping up, 3. The unbeaten chasers are 13 from 53, 29.55% profit. 2 mile chasing, the most specialist division. Very few horses can go an Arkle gallop and jump at it. Form from earlier in the season tends to get repeated. So focusing on unbeaten chasers has been a good betting strategy. This season's unusual in that all the main protagonists have been beaten over fences. So we need to look through the bear form and see if there's a horse who will be unbeaten but for a valid excuse that's unlikely to recur. If I were confident he was going to run, I'd be with Hunter's Yarn, but it's apparently up in the air whether he'll travel at the moment. And looking at the bear form and the prices, to me, the obvious one to back is Ilete Tom, who's about 8.4. Near 2.5 miles on almost unraceable ground at Limerick at Christmas wouldn't have seen him to best effect. As Don says, be forgiving of horses who don't take to that sort of challenge. And he's won his other 2 races, so he's unbeaten by that forgivable run. Arrives here in really good form, showing his speed to mow down Founder 50, having had a bit of ground to make up in a steadily run race. You can mark him up a bit for that, I think. On his Irish Arkle win, you could argue he ought to be favourite. Beat Founder 50 and neck, Facile Vega 3 1/4 lengths away in third, and Marine Nationale, obviously not himself, 10 1/4 lengths away in fifth. Founder 50 and especially Facile Vega look to be crying out for a step up in trip. Not down another furlong and 21 yards to the Arkle. And the turning old course wouldn't look to suit Founder 50 either, the way he jumps right. Yet they're hardly any a bigger price than Ilete Tom. If Marine National's over what courses flop, then he could easily turn the form round. Let Don make the case for that. But it's that Ilete Tom doesn't have a sexy profile, and that's inflating his price. He had no respect for hurdles, but despite being small, the sight of the fence has really helped him. He's settled and he's athletic enough to jump the stiff Leopardstown fences, so the easier Cheltenham ones ought to be fine. There'll be plenty made of the fact he was disappointing in the Supreme last year after bolting up at DRF, but he was very keen in the Supreme, just knocked all his hurdles out of the way and never got into a rhythm. So he has got to take the day, but I'd be optimistic he'll be a different proposition now, and I like backing the unsexy winners against the hype horses. Willie says Dnaiel keep the ride at Cheltenham, which is good as he looks like he needs a bit of knowing. He's ridden him the last twice. I backed him in the Supreme last year when he made a mess of everything. I was in danger of letting that prejudice me against him, but decided I need to forgive that. You don't often get the chance to back the Ford novice chaser at 8.4 in the Arkle at this stage of the season. So I'm going with Il Était Temps.
Okay, Don, over to you. Look, it's similar to the Facile Vega talk before the Supreme last year. Over the next 28 days, we're going to see you're either with Marine Nationale or against them. It will take a bit of forgiving, but what sort of price would sort of interest you? The price I've currently read out there, he's in and around the 3.75 mark, although those markets are being reformed ever so slightly.
Yeah, like it's hard to put a figure on it, isn't it? Because it's kind of binary. You either forgive him his last run or you don't, because he won't win an Arkle on his last run, and without his last run, he's an odds-on shot. That's my reading of it.
So he's either odds on. His right price is either odds on or probably 8 or 9.0. So you're either getting value or you're way off. Yeah, gotcha.
And then it's a case of if he can bounce, but because look, I think it's safe to say it wasn't the real Marine Nationale we saw the last day. That's not as good as he is. He's obviously a better horse than that. He was so good over hurdles last season. He was brilliant on his debut this season, which we've already covered. Like he clocked a faster time than Dnaiel Blue clocked. And that was with Gentleman de May making the pace in the Dnaiel Blue race. And like, she's a 159 rated horse. And he didn't even go as fast as he could go that day. His jumping was superb. It just, the last day, you kind of knew from the third last that it wasn't going to be his day. And he was still right there until the last. But for whatever reason, whether it was ground or whatever it wasn't his running. So then you have to allow him that, trust that Barry Connell is going to be able to get him back to his best at Cheltenham, which I think that's a legitimate hypothesis that he will be back at his best at Cheltenham. We know that he goes well there. If he jumps as well as he jumped on his chasing debut in that beginner's chase at Leopardstown over Christmas, then he's head and shoulders above everything. Look, I do like Il Était Temps and agree with Matt on the kind of unfashionable horse, but just in the back of my mind, it's the Supreme last year. It's the Triumph Hurdle the year before as well, when he was coming there on the back of a really good run at Leopardstown. And Matt's right. He's settling better over fences now than he did over hurdles, and that's probably allowed him go forward. And he did well. He showed a lot of pace and a lot of grit to get the better of Found 50 the last day. But just in the back of my, like, he's short enough for a horse. His 2 runs at Cheltenham have been disappointing, under what you would have expected given the profile with which he went into those races. And to me, if he was a bigger price, you could allow that. But just for me, I just think that that's too much at a shortish price. And again, agree with Matt on Found 50 and Facile Vega. I think they'll be better over further. So Calixius was on my radar, but I'll leave him to Tom, and you can see the case for him. But no, I think Marine Nationale, I still think that he's the standard setter.
Yeah, you look at that form at the DRF and you think it's not good enough yet. It's the top 4 in the betting, Tom. So if you want to play from outside the top 4, you're sort of looking at Calixios here, perhaps.
Yeah, so I think it's an interesting race to have a bet in. I can't see myself backing Marine Nationale unless he does drift out to a silly price. I guess my concern with him is the way he finished off the race, added to the fact that he had a wind up done in the off season and has worn a tongue tie since. It's just too much of a concern for me to back him at the current price. But I totally see if you take a line, if you put a line through that run, yes, he's an odds on poke. But it was too disappointing for me to back him. And I said maybe there is a Barry Connell element of, less experience with these type of horses going onto a festival, having suffered a setback like that. I think it's a huge ask for him to get Marine Nationale back on song, but he may well be. And just some of the things that have come out of the scratching. So Iroko is out. Surely he's going to go over to the 2.5 mile race. Factor File we know is going to go, or almost certainly going to go, Brown Advisory. Interestingly, Henry de Bromhead saying In the Pocket is back and may well go to the festival and be supplemented for one of the races. So he's another JP horse to consider. You would imagine he may well go over the minimum. I don't know. Just looking down them, I'm convinced if Factor File is going to go over further, Willie's going to run Facile Vega over 2.5. I think he should. It's hard to argue against that move. So I'm pretty confident taking him out. As Matt said, we were both with Hunter's Yarn, but some of the quotes coming from Willie, he's too difficult to put up now, I think, anyway, with the doubts as to whether or not he will travel and Blood Destiny fit into that billing. Quilixios is a horse who I quite like the fact he's a Henry horse, because he's had obviously he was a Triumph horse, but then he's had another season and then an enforced absence over hurdles. So he's coming here as a slightly older horse. I'm making loose comparisons to sizing Europe out of desperation. They're very different, obviously, but he's a slightly older horse who's had more than one season over hurdles. He comes in here as the slightly forgotten Grade 1 winner, if you like. He was bumping into Tehupo 3 times, or the Goran start at the back end of February of the season before last. I wouldn't read him too harshly on that. He was hanging. He wasn't right. He then had 600 days off the track. The runs over fences have been good, bar the Punchestown run, but as Matt suggests about horses, can we forgive them that run? Yes, it was over 3 miles on soft ground. He didn't stay a yard, and he was eased down at the finish, beaten 70 lengths. But otherwise, he would have won further at Limerick without a bad mistake and Rachel dropping her reins. And he was basically foot perfect at Naas. The trouble is, beating Safarur 2.25 lengths needs to be improved on. But he's just an unknown quantity who, if I'm going to have a bet in the race, it's definitely him at the moment, given that we know he's an intended runner in the race. He could easily, if Hunter's Yarn, Fassar Vega, Gaelic Warrior don't line up, which I don't think they're going to, he could easily be a sort of 7.0 poke on the day. And we know he's got the back class. The Tehupo form reads very well, obviously, albeit it was a long time ago and over hurdles. And he's had 2 good runs over fences with 1 excuse blowout job. So I feel like there's a fleshy enough case I can make for Quilixios at this stage.
Yeah, a lot of fun. JP Bingo being played on Twitter with that in the pocket news. So if he does get supplemented for the Arkle, you've got him in the Arkle, you've got Factifal in the Brown Advisory, you've got Corvus Cross in the 4 miler, not so quite 4 miler, and then you have the you also have your Turner's horse there as well. So there's plenty of JP horses and plenty of JP Bingo being put into action. Final word to you, Matt, on Marine National at that price, 375. Are you happy to leave him?
I'd rather back him in the win market than there aren't place markets yet. You could almost back him in the win market and lay him in the place market and hope that he either bulks up or bombs out. He could be that sort of merchant. My racing fans hat on, I'd like to see him win because he looks to have more ability than any of these. And if we're going to get a horse to take on El Fabiolo next year, it'd be great to have one of his quality.
Absolutely, yeah. Definitely plenty of action in this market heading into the festival. The second race we're going to cover is also in 28 days. It's the Supreme Novices Hurdle. A few scratchings and a few notable scratchings. A lot of them, Caldwell Potter's obviously been taken out. That I'd say they're likely to go Aintree with him, and a few other scratchings there as well. But the current prices we have in front of me, Ballyburn 225 favourite now for Supreme. Mystical Power 5.5, Jericho, Derupa Name 9.0, FIREFOX 12.0. 17.0 and bigger the rest. That includes Slade, Steel. Matt, bring your trend and I'll bring Donn in first on the thoughts on this race.
In the last 13 renewals, the front 3 in the SP market, 11 from 42, 22.52% profit. Fewer horses coming off the flat, so many of the best novices and so few hands, leading to the mega yards knowing their pecking order. The Supreme has become a predictable race on the day, and the front of the SP market continues to be under bet. For those who want to bet at juicier prices, you need to be doing it anti-post. And that means playing Mullins Bingo and this year JP Bingo as well. This could easily cut up into a single figure field as it did in 2021 and 2022. So there's the potential to back a real shortener. One anti-post strategy is working out whether Ballyburn goes for the Supreme or Bearing Bingham and then targeting the other race. Find a runner with a realistic chance of winning. It's going to go for the race. Ballyburn doesn't. You should be onto a great anti-post bet on the Matchbook exchange, as the prices of those in the race Ballyburn doesn't go for are going to crash when his target becomes apparent.
Okay, we'll bring Donn in a second in terms of what Mullins said about the top 2 in the market. But Tom, given what Matt said there, give us your thoughts on the race and what you're kind of sort of looking at from an anti-post strategy 28 days out.
So this is what Matt and I have been WhatsApping about for the last week or so. Is this is the angle for the Supreme bet? Is I cannot see any way in hell that Mullins is going to run Mystical Power and Ballyburn in the same race, because he doesn't do that with his A team. Matt's written about this plenty. He'll split them up because that's what he does and gives them the best chance of winning their respective races. he has constantly said about Ballyburn, who I would love to go for the Supreme and think he should go for the Supreme, based on what he did at the Dublin Racing Festival. But he's constantly said on pedigree, he looks as though he should go over further. David Casey was on the Nick Like Daily podcast on the Monday after the DRF saying he looks as though he on pedigree he was in need of further, but we're maybe reconsidering that now. But I feel that's been their base on him. They've tried him over further. Mystical Power is a keen going horse. They wanted to get settled last time. And it doesn't seem like there's any way they're going to go up in trip with that horse. So if I'm right that they're going to split them up, Ballyburn is going to go to the Bearing Bingham. He may not, but that's what I'm banking on. There are two horses. I did have a few more, but a couple have been scratched. There are two horses with this as their main definite intended target, it would seem. One is pretty obvious, and that's the Ben Pauling horse who was taken out the Betfair hurdle. I didn't put him up in the Betfair hurdle off a marking of 135. So how can I put him up for a Supreme? But if Ballyburn doesn't go, the other factor would tell her the name is that he's likely to go forward. You know, Ben Pauling's got some nice novices this year. Can I see a British horse winning a Supreme? Probably not. But can I see him shortening up a good bit from 34.0 for the race that he is going to run in? Yes. And he also ticks the experience box with this being his fifth start over hurdles. I think we've talked about it on here. It's less of a thing than it used to be, but experience in a Supreme does go a long way because of the questions it poses about a horse's temperament. So I think there's a huge chance that this horse will go off a good bit shorter and trade even shorter when he's running as well, because I think he'll go forward. And barring the run at Aintree, he's been very good, but I don't think the soft ground suited there. I think he is going to want a sound surface, but I think he'll shorten up a good bit come the day, tell her the name. This is his definite target. The other one is Tully Hill, who's been left in the race. You know, I don't know his well-being, but he's got to be interesting based upon his Punchestown run in a bumper behind A Dream to Share. He doesn't tick the experience box. He was tried over a little bit further, but he was very good last time, and he's just creeping quietly into the picture, given that he's been left in. I don't know how many Mullins took out. There are a few notable ones, obviously. No surprise he took Predator's Gold out. I mean, he's still got a shed load in, and they won't all run, but he has got the back class, Tully Hill, and this is his only entry. So I think that's worth taking note of. The fact that it's his only entry. He's been placed in a Grade 1 bumper. He looked very good last time. I don't mind this as a race. I know Matt's got a bit more on it, where horses have been beaten coming into this, particularly if they won their previous start before coming here. I don't know how many unbeaten horses tend to win it, but I feel like that can be overbet. Ultimately, do I think Mystical Power, if he's left in, will probably go and win? Yes, I think he's the best horse in the race. There's also a lot on the breeding of Mystical Power. Just to say, he's a Galileo out of Annie Power, and there are lots of tie-ins here with different owners, be it, you know, on the flat and over jumps. I don't think it would be very popular if Mystical Power was beaten by stable companion Ballyburn in the wider scheme of things. Maybe I'm looking too much into it and looking to flesh out my case for Ballyburn going up in trip. I probably am, but that's how I want to play it at the moment. With him defecting, taking a chunk out of the market, and Tully Hill, and in particular, Tell Her the Name lining up.
Fair play, Thomas. The best case I've heard for Ballyburn not going to the Supreme yet, so I'll give you that. Quick one-liner on Slade Steele, because I don't know if I was, you know, when you hear a quote and you're like, everyone's heard it, it was a one-liner in an interview Henry de Bromhead said after the Ballyburn beat Slade Steele, and he basically said, we will avoid as best we can Ballyburn, in which case, if he does go to the Ballymore, then the Supreme could be the one for him, Slade Steele.
I hadn't really thought about that. I feel like Slade Steele was just going to go to the Bearing Bingham. I hadn't really thought about it. You know, I yeah, because that's it, that all along. I was told a while ago that he was being aimed at the Bearing Bingham. I didn't take the price, whatever. But that has been his race for a long time. So I feel like a reshuffle on that front would be unlikely. They've still got the angle that, you know, maybe they'll beat him over further. But I'll be honest, I hadn't thought about Slade Steele going anywhere other than Bearing Bingham.
Yeah, Don, for you, I maybe firstly on Slade Steele, because I'd done a couple of small doubles with Ballyburn Supreme, Slade Steele, Ballymore, Bearing Bingham, back to form. But he did reference this in his interview after the DRF and did call Ballyburn that thing, you know, so he knows this horse in his head is unbeatable. So I don't know if you've got any more inkling, just listen to some of those Henry de Bromhead quotes over the last couple of weeks.
So can I just jump in and give my apologies and say I have to leave this beautiful broadcast, and I apologise.
Tom, not for the Cheltenham Festival.
Thank you for having me. Oh my God, nap for the Cheltenham Festival is I can't put up a 1.33 shot on El Fabiolo, can I?
No.
I'm gonna have to Key de Bourbon in the Key de Bourbon when he runs in the Martin Pipe. There you go.
Thank you, Tom. Thank you, Tom.
Beautiful.
Sorted there.
Bye,
Don,
everyone.
take it away.
See you, Tom.
Take it away, Don.
Yeah, on South Seal, yeah, like Tom, I guess I kind of thought that the Burying Bingham is the race for him. I know he won his maiden hurdle over 2 miles, but he came under a ride earlier than King of Kingsfield did that day, and he stayed on to get the better of him. He won by over 5 lengths in the end, so it was a strong staying performance. It was a strong performance, but it was a strong staying performance over 2 miles. And then he won the Navan hurdle over 2.5, which to me that was his distance. They only beat Lecky Watson by a half a length, but I think he probably won with a bit more in hand than that. And the run the last day in the Taz Ireland race at the Dublin Racing Festival, I think if there'd been a 2.25 or a 2.5 mile race at the Dublin Racing Festival, he might have run in that instead. But Henry he doesn't tend to go over those longer trips with a horse who might be coming back down in trip. And it was either 2 miles or 2 miles 6.5. He went over 2 miles and he got beaten by Ballyburn, which, as we know, no disgrace in that. But he was beaten 7 lengths by him. Ballyburn wasn't going any further away from the run around the bypassed final flight. He arrested the deficit at about 7 lengths, and he kept on up the hill, and he was 7 lengths clear of King of Kingsfield. So I think his best chance of winning at Cheltenham, well, it may be that wherever it's in the race that Ballyburn doesn't run in, but it's probably 2.5 or the intermediate trip, the 2 miles 5 of the Burying Bingham. That's probably the race for him. And I know what you're saying, Dan, about what Henry said after the race. It was a wee bit tongue-in-cheek, though, wasn't it? So it might be that, you know, it looks like the Burying Bingham is the race that he's going for, and maybe he's just hoping that Ballyburn won't go for there as well, for that race as well.
Yeah.
But
no, you're right. It was said in tongue-in-cheek. It was like a one-line thing. I mean, maybe reading too much into it. All right, but I just, you know, when you're half listening to an interview on the telly, my ears pricked up, going, well, I'm going to separate them either way. But yeah, it's interesting. All right.
And you know, that may be the case. And look, Ballyburn, wherever he goes, he's going to be favourite, and that's right. He won his maiden hurdle over 2.5. His pedigree is all stamina. Noble Endeavour. I think he's related to Noble Endeavour. He's a half brother to Noble Endeavour. Was a Paddy Power Chase winner, but he showed 2 mile pace the last day, and that's the race that has Willie Mullins and his team thinking maybe he is a 2 miler. Mystical Power, like you would have thought on breeding Mystical Power by Galileo out of any power, he'd be going further than 2 miles, and maybe he will in time. But he is a keen going sort, and he kept on stepping forward. He won that was at Ballinrobe, and he won his maiden, or won his bumper, and he kind of won it well enough in the end without really causing any fireworks. He was better at Galway on his first run over hurdles, and then he was very good at Punchestown, obviously, in the Moscow Flyer hurdle. And the Moscow Flyer, before last year, that was always a 2 mile race for Willie Mullins. And like his Moscow Flyer winners, Duvan, Min, all of those, they all went to the Supreme. Last year, the winner went to the Ballymore, obviously. So and Parry Pass. So it's not set in stone that that's what he's going to do in Mystical Power, but it does seem that the Supreme, the 2 mile race, is the more likely race for him. And you know, would he run Ballymore or Ballyburn and Mystical Power in the same race? I'm sure, like Matt obviously has more on that than I have, but it's maybe not. Maybe there is 2 best novice hurdlers as things stand at the moment. Maybe they're going to be split up. But if Slade still runs here, I'd be interested in him. I'm thinking Il Atlantique, then they say that he's definitely going for the Burying Bingham. FIREFOX, he's a little bit of a forgotten horse. Like he was beaten the last day in the Lawlers of Nace race, but that was 2.5. B, again, he was sent off a short enough price. It wasn't a step forward from his run at Ferryhouse the last day, but in the back of my mind is the regard in which Gordon Elliott and his team seemed to hold him. Like whenever he won his maiden hurdle at the Hatton's Grace hurdle meeting, he had the first and second Far and Glory and King of Kingsfield in the Royal Bond hurdle on the same weekend. And Gary asked him at the end of the weekend, what's your, what novice hurdle do you take out of this? And he said, FIREFOX, a maiden hurdle winner. So that's really interesting. And maybe dropping back down and trip to 2 miles, that might be the thing for FIREFOX. But I still think there's more to come from FIREFOX. As things stand at the moment, I have not a bet in the race. Ballyburn for me is the standard setter. Outside of him, maybe FIREFOX is a wee bit under the radar.
Okay, yeah, Matt, you've been waiting patiently to get in on your thoughts on the Supreme. So give us a little bit of your takeaway on the front few in the market.
Yeah, picking up on the point Tom made about the A-team rule and Willie Mullins, it's absolutely right. I'm convinced he will find his best 2 novices, of which Ballyburn is clearly one, and split those up between the Supreme and Bearing Bingham. Just a bit of history on that. I think the default position is that he runs his best novice in the Supreme. Since Pont Alexander 11 years ago, the only time the speedy novice that Willie clearly thought was his best hasn't run in the Supreme is when Sir Gerhard won the Bearing Bingham 2 years ago. And many punters got sucked into thinking he would go for the Supreme. But that year, Willie's other A-teamer was the tearaway Dice Up Dynamo, who was so keen he had to run at 2 miles. So, though they pretty much all had their last runs now, that's the big question. Who's the other A-teamer? If it is Mystical Power, then I can definitely see the case that's been made. Mystical Power's keen, goes for the Supreme, and Ballyburn, who's flexible, will go for the Bearing Bingham. By contrast, if it's a horse like Idle Antique, who's the other A-teamer, then Ballyburn will go back to the default position of being in the Supreme. I think it's really up in the air at the moment, and the markets are very much suggesting that Ballyburn is going to go for the Supreme, and I think it's much closer to 50-50 than the markets are going for. That's why I think the Supreme's a good betting race. Like Don, I like FIREFOX. I'm going with him. I think 12.0 is a big price. Beat Ballyburn on the hurdling debuts. As Don said, that interview with Gary was very telling about where he stood in the pecking order. Jack Kennedy said something similar. He was asked for his best novices, had to think about the other ones, the other divisions, but it was straight in with FIREFOX. On the face of it, he beat Ballyburn pretty easily on their hurdling debuts by 2.5 lengths. He did have a bumper run, so he had a fitness edge. And we've discussed in earlier episodes, some of Willie's Grade 1 novices weren't improving in the normal way for a run. They were coming on stones. Dancing City certainly looks to be one. He's beat nearly 20 lengths on his hurdling debut. I thought Factival was another, although since American Mike's 10-up winner, more open-minded about him. But Dancing City and Factival made their seasonal debut on the 18th and 19th of November, whereas Ballyburn wasn't until the 2nd of December. So you'd think he'd have been a bit more forward by then. Willie said afterwards that Ballyburn wasn't suited by the sprint, so maybe he's more of a galloping type. FIREFOX said was disappointing when only 8 3/4 lengths fourth to Reed and Tommy Wrong in the 2.5 mile Grade 1 Nace. Came back slightly lame. Gordon had a bit of a cold. Something was going through his yard at that point. Plenty of his horses weren't finishing out their races. And the markets are giving Ballyburn a pass for Fairy House. But as Don said, FIREFOX, not so much at Nace, a bit of a forgotten horse. So there's a fair element of speculation, but it wouldn't surprise me if it actually should be the other way around. So the vibes, the form from Ballyburn, the fact his target's confirmed. He's been taken out of the Bearing Bingham today. Thanks, Ryan's just told us that. So he may not have to take on Ballyburn again. 12.0, you could see him being at least half that price. So he's got the real possibility of being a shortener, as well as having good vibes and good form.
Don, taking FIREFOX out of the Bearing Bingham, that's to make sure Ballyburn runs in the Bearing Bingham, isn't it?
Interesting, yeah. Interesting one. Declare your hand early.
Yeah, I like it.
Maybe.
Yeah, I'm like you. I just love these games that ultimately are pointless work trying to work out, but they are hilarious. Because I heard on another rival podcast of ours that really good trader, he priced it at around 1 to 6. Ballyburn to run in the Supreme. But it does seem a lot of the bookmakers are working with that sort of price in mind. It's interesting that you think it's 50-50 or as closer to 50-50.
Yeah, I would have it. It does depend on the other horse. And so it's where they think Mystical Power's the other one that I can see with. The other one I was interested in was Mirazor West, who's been scratched. It's been disappointing. So maybe he's a longer term project. But if Mystical Power is the other A-teamer, I can definitely see it.
And just last thing on Jericho de Repenay, like he's going to go Supreme, isn't he? Here, which maybe is there any chance Mystical Power goes, to the Bearing Bingham? There probably still is a small chance.
But there's definitely a chance if they think that they can get him settled, or if he's a B-teamer, he might end up there. JP is not one of those owners with an ego who wants to be represented in every race. He's very happy to run horses against each other. So, for example, Jedskin, my tent or yours, ran in the Supreme when he didn't have a Bearing Bingham runner. So I think it will be more on the merits. But Jericho de Repenay, for me, has been a bit of a hype horse. He's probably one I want to take on.
Yeah, Don, for you on the JP factor, and Matt is correct. Like, JP is happy and has ran his JP horses in the Supreme in previous years against each other.
Oh yeah, no, it's like JP tends to allow his horses run wherever he thinks that the race is there for them, wherever the best race is for them. When we ran, in a couple of exceptions, didn't he run Binocular and Captain CB in the Supreme? 1 year Captain CB won it, and Binocular was second, I think. But yeah, it's I'd say the JP horses will go where to the race that suit them best. And but that said, it's hard. it's you can't argue that Mystical Power, maybe he, like, definitely on pedigree, he's bred to go out and trip at some point. Maybe that'll be next season because he's a wee bit keen, although he wasn't that keen the last day in the Moscow Flower Hurdle. Maybe he will be able to go out and trip, but yeah, I'd be surprised if he didn't run in the 2 mile race.
Yeah, we've got 28 days to the Cheltenham Festival, and it's going to be a lot of talk, but it is creeping up on us. It always does, because of that short month in February. Every year it creeps up there. So my thanks to Matt and to Don. We will be back next week with a brand new Matchbook Cheltenham Trail, counting down the days to the Cheltenham Festival, and stay tuned to our social channels to catch all our Cheltenham content when that will be, including a preview night as well. Until then, enjoy the week's racing. We'll chat to you next week. Bye-bye.